Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. So one of the great things about our little community here is that, when we're all in our kind of kumbaya mode and we hear about some of the really kind of crazy problems that we have here in South Korea, a lot of you guys chime in and say that, wow, that's like the same thing around the world. Like we have that here, maybe it's worse here, or maybe it's worse for you guys, but we're kind of like all the same. And to a large extent, that is true. But also on this channel, what I would really like to bring up, and I think that makes it kind of fun for us to see and also resolve some questions in our head about specific quirks about Korean culture, is when you start to see cultural differences, you'll see it, I think, not in like what we have or don't have. It's more of like we have the same thing in each country, but we weigh it different, or the response right now to this particular situation is way off kilter in our eyes, like if you're from a different country. So we wanted to get today into the whole Seoulite or Freezia controversy. Why is it such a big deal to Korean people that she was caught wearing counterfeit designer brand names? When there's like a lot of other big problems going on in Korea. Like, in my other video about really delving into the reality of the suicide rate in Korea, where it's not necessarily such a high self-offing rate because a lot of other ways of passing into this world are covered up within that. Namely, in that case, it was most likely the police covering up for a serial, let's say, offender of women, and they just said, oh my god, like all these girls decided to take their knickers off before jumping to another world. That was like a thing over in that particular town. Don't think so. That was probably a police cover-up. Or in the sense of, like, let's say a president puts private citizens on a blacklist. Don't you think that's a little bit bigger of kind of like an issue than, wearing fake designer goods? Or the current government going into your cell phone records and your private message chats? Don't you think that might be cause for a little bit more alarm? Or what about recently, apparently some comedian, and we don't even know who because they're not making as big of a deal about this comedian, but he was caught in public pee-peeing on somebody's head, a girl's head, and I think she was a teenager, and he got a very light sentence because apparently just because the girl had some headphones in her ear and she was listening to music and wasn't aware that something was happening to her, that made it less of a big deal. Now, don't you think all those things should cause a lot more public alarm and uproar, that there should be more of a punishment that fits the crime, rather than somebody mixing in counterfeit or fake items in her overpriced closet? So where's this comedian's YouTube apology? Where's the police's YouTube apology? Where's President Park Geun-hye's YouTube apology? Where's the current government's YouTube apology? Well, we have a very tearful YouTube apology from this YouTuber, Seoulite. She's 25 years old. She's a YouTuber and reality TV star. She recently got a bunch of attention for her role in Singles Inferno. I think it's sort of like MTV's The Real World meets Survivor meets The Bachelor all in one, and it's like set on a remote South Korean island. And so, it seems like something like, like people in their 20s would like to watch. But before she even got to that level, she was very famous for being this like influencer where millions of people follow her on Instagram and YouTube. And she's kind of like just famous for being famous by like showing her like wardrobe hauls and being a style and fashion influencer. And I guess the main thing about her was not necessarily kind of styling tips, but more the shock value of the name brands. And I think that is what has gotten her into deep trouble and fomented the backlash against her. But my point is that it's probably the viewer's fault for buying into that in the first place. So do I like her? No. Do I think she's shady? Yes. Do I think she probably knew she was buying at least some of the items counterfeit? Yeah. But on the other hand, I never watched her, never wanted to, and if she was so shady, if she was so nasty, then she shouldn't have gotten so many followers. Look, you know how I'm trying to do here, and not nearly as many followers because the public apparently wants to watch a girl just show off how many name brands she has. So, in a sense, if that wasn't something that people wanted and that wasn't your value, I'm not saying you as in like, y'all here on my channel, but you as in like the public that's now like totally like bashing her, that means that you have bought into this lifestyle. So, what they're saying on the surface, which I agree with, is that you should definitely not buy counterfeit goods. You should not wear counterfeit goods. You should not make counterfeit goods. You should not sell counterfeit goods because it's really bad for the artist and creator who made it. They don't get any kind of cut from it. And also it harms the business cycle. And it's just kind of a little bit weird to have like a bunch of fakes. But I don't think that that's the actual reason that people are so upset, because obviously there is a fake market and people have fake stuff even today, although a lot less these days. I'll get into that later. But I think the real reason that people are so upset, if you are one of these people who are upset, is that it affects your ego. Because a lot of the analysis around the audience, I guess, that she had were people who wanted to have this lifestyle, not just appreciate the aesthetics of it, because, you can kind of just look at it like, wow, she's a great curator of fashion. Whether it's all real or not doesn't matter. And I would even argue in some sense, even if it wasn't real, she's kind of advertising for free for the brands so that people go out and buy the real stuff. So in some ways, like, I don't know if she's like totally harming their business in that sense, because she didn't get sponsored. The brand didn't have to waste their time and resources and energy sending her a bag. She just found a fake one. But then she was selling essentially to her followers, go out to Dior and buy this bag for real. So in a way, she was kind of like helping their business. But the backlash, because she's saying that when in her apology, she said, "I am so sorry for betraying you guys." I'm like, betraying for what? I mean, like, if I was just watching, like, yeah, maybe I'd feel a little bit betrayed, but she brought, kind of something pretty, like a pretty girl with pretty clothes and a pretty atmosphere. Like, I wouldn't feel betrayed by that. Like, I mean, she kind of, I'd feel more betrayed if she brought something ugly, and then she said like, "Sorry guys, I just couldn't afford a pretty bag, so you're gonna have to like, put up with this picture of an ugly one that I could afford." And so the reason why they feel betrayed is that actually they weren't looking at the aesthetics or the artistry or the curation that she was doing. They were trying to live vicariously. They were trying to use her for their false self. So most likely these people who are in an uproar are what you would categorize as inverted narcissists. And an inverted narcissist is essentially a narcissist who can't do it, and they have to depend and live vicariously through somebody who seems to be a narcissist, and they latch on to them and they do the narcissistic work for them. So just because somebody's shy, just because somebody doesn't seem like they would be like aggressive, doesn't necessarily mean that they are cold-hearted narcissists themselves. Sometimes they just can't do it. They don't have the resources, the skills or whatnot, but they definitely have the same mindset and desires. That's the worst part. They have the desire to what? To have something and lord it over somebody else that they don't have it. That is so different from somebody who's just thirsty and just like, well, no, just like literally thirst, not like, thirst trap, but like thirsty. And then you're just like, oh, I just want a drink of water too. Oh, wow, what a nice, beautiful bottle of water. These people are more of like, I have water and you don't. That's totally different. And there are a lot of people who may not even have the water, but they wish that they could have the water, not so that they could quench their thirst, but to basically make somebody else feel bad that they don't have any water. So in this case, water is designer goods. And so they were looking to her as like, wow, she's like one of these girls that can afford all of them for real. That's why we're not going to be jealous of her, because she is fulfilling my fantasy of being like some it girl that has it all, and haha, you peons, you can't have anything. And so that's kind of like a sick and twisted place to be, but it kind of all rolls and works as long as the game keeps going. But then when it comes out that she is sort of fraudulent, I mean, it wasn't as if all of her stuff was fake, but enough of it was fake that made a lot of people mad. That's also why, like, I think this is different, because if 100% of her stuff was fake, I think that would be a little bit different. And it shouldn't have gotten this kind of uproar, I think. But it does make sense if you consider who is making the uproar. People who suddenly feel like she betrayed their self-ego and self-image. That suddenly they are the ones wearing those fake Chanel suits and carrying those fake Dior bags. Because a normal person would just basically look at her and be like, dang, like, yeah, that's kind of weird that, she's wearing some fake stuff. That's not so good. Like, move on. But somebody who merged, how I was talking about like the toxic fandoms in K-pop, where you're basically like merging yourself into the celebrity. And so whatever they do is a reflection of you. And so that's why you go nuts if anybody kind of criticizes the celebrity, because you're feeling like somebody is criticizing you. So in the same sense here, since they couldn't have all the stuff, they were suddenly like kind of saw her as a false extension of themselves, and it was fine and dandy when she looked so glorious. But if she wears something fake, that means they're wearing something fake, and their ego cannot handle that, and then they go whoosh, want to like kind of bash her. Does she deserve criticism? Of course she does. Does she deserve to pay for her sins of fooling the public and creating this image? Sure she does. But my point is, she shouldn't have had an image to apologize for in the first place if people weren't so materialistic. If you guys weren't so, not you as in our community, but like you as in like the people bashing her, like there would not be a market unless it was for you guys. And so when I looked at this, I was just like, a metaphor. It's as if like she was selling answers to like a test, and it turns out that the answers were wrong. And so all the customers got real mad at her and were blaming her and saying what a bad person she was. But they never went and looked in the mirror and asked themselves why they trying to buy answers to a test and cheat the system. And so in a way, I think that's what they're doing. They're trying to cheat the system. They're trying to be something that they're not anyway. and they're using her to fulfill this sick fantasy that will never come true anyway, wasting all of our time now that we're talking about it. But we have to talk about it because, like I said, this is getting more attention to all these things, like even kind of like violations of our Constitution, violation of our privacy rights, violations of the police actually doing their job and capturing real criminals and not covering up for them and then putting them under false statistics, and especially like the way that we've seen with the whole SJM case. Why is this Dior, Chanel, Prada, Gucci thing getting more attention and uproar? Now that's the thing, uproar about a public contract or social contract being violated than some of these real egregious assaults on our society. Because I think if President Park had been caught with a fake Gucci bag, she would still be in jail and not have gotten medical amnesty by the president, because the public would be more upset about her carrying a fake Gucci bag than violating their constitutional rights or violating public safety or letting a weird shamanistic best friend into the White House, into the Blue House, making decisions or doing stock manipulations on behalf of corporate bribery. They would be fixated on probably her purse, which they were. There was this whole thing about like, ooh, what kind of bag is she carrying? And it was a real bag, but it was like, made by like some independent boutique designer. But let's be real. That's where the values seem to be. So the emphasis I wanted to make here is don't believe those arguments that say like, oh, it's about the designer's integrity. It's really about this group of people feeling like betrayed, that their fantasy of having something that other people don't got violated. Again, it's the ego. So whenever you feel like this doesn't make sense, like, you can kind of see the similarities between your culture and Korean culture, but then when you're kind of getting into the sense of like, there's something that doesn't make sense here, like what is off? It usually has to do with something that involves a bruised ego that is very low or small or narcissistic or all of the above, actually. And so in this case, this girl violated these people's false self. When you don't have your real self, you have to create a false self. And that false self was merged with her image of being some like Chanel Gucci doll. And once that doll was ruined, they go after and want to destroy it, because the quicker they destroy it, the quicker they could get rid of it, the quicker they can replace it with another false idol that they can substitute as their self instead of their real self. Now, do I have sympathy for her? Absolutely. And do I have sympathy for the people who are even mad at her? A little bit, because in a way, like when I first came to Korea, and definitely when like, over 20 years ago when I was here for like summer school and stuff, the counterfeit market was booming. It was hot. Like you can get anything like knockoff, and it was like super high quality. Don't talk to me about something on Canal Street in Manhattan. That stuff is just like, that would be like play toys compared to some of the stuff they had going on here. And suddenly, about, I would say, after 2010, that counterfeit market, maybe there was more of a crackdown, and then also consumer taste changed where people just wanted the real thing. It just kind of disappeared. But I think what started to happen beginning then, especially as economic inequality even grew more, is that it became more and more unobtainable to have these luxury items because that counterfeit market had disappeared. I think it's still around, but I think it's so much harder, and I don't think there's a lot of variety. So whereas before in the old days, if you really just kind of wanted to scratch that itch of having something like totally luxury name brand, you can kind of fill it a little bit by getting a fake one, and you would pay a lot more than you would pay on Canal Street, but it wouldn't be burdensome. I think it would be like I don't know, at that time, what, Canal Street, you'd have to pay like $30 to $50, but you'd really have to pay like $200 to $300 for something fake in Korea, but that would look like real good. But I think at around 2010, that difference between 200 to 300 and maybe 700 to 800 started to get smaller, and so people just opted for the real stuff. But then inflation just went through the roof and there was no fake stuff. So what I'm saying, like now in 2022, it's almost impossible for a lot of people to have these designer goods because they're so expensive. And then also these designers have gotten a lot more tricky where they're, I think, artificially limiting supply. So you can't even if you have the money to throw down, you can't even get them because they're just not available. And so this makes it more of a frustrated feeling, I think, in a lot of people. And that's why they get even more obsessed with living vicariously through people like this, and then more upset when it turns out to be false. At the same time, I mean, come on, what is the big freaking deal? What's the big freaking deal? But that's, I think, when you get to start to see like, okay, now it sort of makes sense, like why people are being overly stressed out about this. I do have a little bit of sympathy for her because I wonder if she had gone to like the secondary market to find, like used market, to find some of these luxury goods and bought them and not known that it was fake, because like I said, some of these fakes can be really good. And personally, I didn't buy like something like totally, you know, that brand Discovery, which is not even like high end, but there was some pop-up stores selling like discounted winter jackets. So it's like a long, we call it long coat padding, but like a long padded coat, like white goose down jacket, and it was at the end of winter, so they were saying like, oh, this is like clearance, end of season. So I was like, okay, I'll just buy one now and wait until like, you know, next winter to wear it. And it was this really cool white one, which was, you know, in vogue for like a couple of years. And the next year I wore it, and then like the sleeves kind of got a little bit funky, where like the dark black ink, what looked like it like the dark sleeve, it looked like it was bleeding ink into the white part, and then also it was just white, so I needed to get dry cleaned. So I went to the cleaners, but they're like, oh, we can't take responsibility for this because I think this ink is just gonna bleed throughout the entire jacket when we do our cleaning. So you have to go to the retail shop and ask for it to get serviced with their after service care. I was like, okay, fine. So I went to the mall, went to the shop, and I said, oh, do you have some after service care? Because the lady at the cleaner said that I should come to you. And he's like, well, where do you get this jacket? I was like, well, you know, it's just kind of like a road shop where it was like on sale, end of clearance. And then he looked it up in his computer, and he was saying like, you know, we never made this model. I was like, what, like in Korea? He's like, no, we never made this model. So he was trying to be sort of polite and say like, dude, this is a fake ass jacket. And then I was like, wait, are you saying that this is fake? And he's like, I think so. And he was really confused because he never saw a fake one before. Because I mean, the price point of like a Discovery jacket is not, I don't think, high enough to justify like a fake industry, but apparently even that was counterfeit. So I had inadvertently bought a counterfeit jacket. And then of course I got rid of it because I was like, I don't want to wear that. But if I really needed to, I would have kept wearing it. But I'm just saying is that it could be somewhat easy for her to have gotten fooled, because there's a lot of fake stuff out there. And if she was just trying to fulfill y'all's not you in our community, y'all, like, you know, her followers, their appetites for incessantly like new unboxing of things and things and things, she probably, no matter how much money she probably had to kind of like go source some stuff that was not full retail value. And that's probably where she got like caught up in some of this, you know, fake stuff. Should she pay the consequences? Sure. Like, what are those consequences? Well, yeah, she's paying them now for like basically halting her career. On the other hand, I mean, maybe she should do something other than just like show off brand names. On the other hand, she was working. She's probably working a lot more than a lot of these other brand ambassadors do. So, I mean, I think it's a toss-up. Like, these brands should actually calculate how much business that she did drive to the real shops and real interest and real future clientele that she did develop through her aspirational brand marketing. So, I think it should be nuanced discussion there, but the real aspect is kind of like the psychopathic behavior of these people who are totally, I think, overblowing their anger towards her when there are so many other things for us to be upset about. We are almost about to elect one, like, no matter if the number one or number two candidate for president goes into office, we are most likely gonna bring in a bunch of crazies, okay? Now that's gonna be a real problem, and you're not even gonna care about Dior, Gucci. You're not even gonna have a chance to even utter those words. I don't even think I'm being that dramatic about it. All right, guys, what do you think? Put your comments below, like, share, subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.